We hope these stories will inspire you. Some new approaches to your delivery. Each speaker is going to have about 8 minutes to present, and then there should be some time for some questions for each of the presenters. So we're going to make a start. Our first presenter is Vanessa Hamilton. They're a sexual health nurse, talking the talk, and their presentation is Consent Starts in the Playground. Really nice follow-on from the things we've been talking about in prior. So, welcome Vanessa.
Hello everybody, thank you. It's lovely to be there virtually from Melbourne. We're good to go? Terrific, thanks. So I'll just get someone to click when I say, so just go back one, that'd be good. Just go back one click, thank you. So, consent starts in the playground. Sexual consent is a big topic at the moment, and I've heard people say that we need to teach it early, but how do we do that for young students because they're too young for sex ed? We're going to get back to consent in a minute, but I just want to briefly visit the term sex ed. Click, please. What do you think teachers and parents come up with when I ask them in education sessions to please come up with a dictionary definition of the word sex and a dictionary definition of the word sexuality? I'm going to give you 10 minutes, 10 seconds thinking time. What do you think broadly people think of when they hear the word sex? When we break it down in the room with adults, it comes down to being male or female, and adults will say sex means the act of, the deed, doing it. And I say, doing what? And they say, penis, vagina, heterosexual intercourse. That's why I think sex is a really unhelpful word. When people think of it, they hear a female or female, and they go straight to thinking about penis, vagina, heterosexual intercourse. It's so limiting to what we know about human sexuality. And in my book, click please, I think that we should never use the term sex ed. I think actually sex should be banned, that word. Click please. So today, talking about consent, teaching consent has nothing to do with sex when you're teaching young children, unless we're referring to sexual consent. In a moment, I'll share 2 stories I used to teach consent in the classroom, Lego and shoelaces. But just to think about consent is about decision making, more so than actions. We can instill decision making processes and about consent in young children that they will carry with them into their intimate encounters later on in life. Children who have a good understanding of consent before they become sexually active will more easily be able to adapt their learning and entrenched values into their future sexual encounters and decision making as young people and adults. You see, consent is integral to human relationships and connection, yet research tells us many young people don't really understand it, although it's actually very simple. See, here are some words that children's education consent must include. It must include pleasure, non-sexual if they're younger. Mutuality needs to include enjoyment, fun, reciprocity and generosity, empathy, power with each other, not over someone, personal space, body autonomy, sense of self, all non-sexual for younger children with additional sexual intimate encounters education for older children. Click please. So I'll show you some examples of resource posters that I've created from these books from Jane Sanders. She's an author here in Melbourne. With her permission, I've created some classroom posters to use to teach consent to 5-year-olds. Next slide, thanks. We use this drawing to stand up and draw our personal body boundary with our imaginary finger. We don't forget to go around the front and around the back as well. Next slide. We use this poster to talk about respect and respecting people's wishes. And these are, while I'm reading the story, body boundaries, consent and respect, and we draw out on these, and these images I leave with the classroom teacher to revisit through the year. Next slide please. And on to consent. 2 stories that I just want to tell you that I use to simplify consent in the classroom. One is shoelaces, especially for the younger children, and then moving to the older children I use Lego. So with the shoelaces, I say to them, I'm going to ask you a question. If you're going to give me permission and consent, you're going to stand over here. If you're not going to give me permission and consent, you're going to stand over here. If you're unsure, you'll stand in the middle. And I say to them, can I please tie your shoelaces? And the ones that say yes will move over there, the no's over there, and the unsure in the middle. And so I go to them and I say, to the people who said yes, what did you say to me? Can I please tie your shoelaces? What would your answer be? And they say, yes, go for it. Of course you can. Yes, yes. People over there in the no. I said, can I tie your shoelaces? And you're not giving me permission to consent. What do you say to me? they say some funny things, but they say no, go away, no you can't, one said bugger off. And to the people in the middle, you weren't sure, and you didn't say anything. You said, I'm not sure. And I say to everybody, have I got their consent? And a unanimous, no, you haven't got their consent. And so we say, what's the only consent? We go back over to the yeses and we all call it out. The only consent is an enthusiastic, ongoing yes. And we all say yeses and all the things that we can say for consent. They'll also say, you can't tie my shoelaces because I've got Velcro, but we move on. For the older kids, I talk about Lego. What if you found the Death Star ship at the op shop and you invite your friend over to build it and they say, yes, I'm going to come and help you build it, and you spend 5 hours building the Death Star and you're just about to finish it, you're just about to put the last pieces on and your friend says, I don't want to play Lego anymore. What do you do about that? From there ensues a fantastic peer conversation. We talk about disappointment, we talk about the person has the right to change their mind if they want to, and we talk about what strategies they can do with that. And they talk about, well, that person can keep playing Lego and the other person can go and do something else. We can negotiate something else to play together that we'll both enjoy. We could stop and we could do it together. All of those analogies obviously can be related to sexual encounters later. 2 additional concepts to think about when teaching consent to kids. Kids should feel proud that they create a space that their friend can freely say that they want to change their mind. It takes courage to create a space when a person might change their mind to be able to freely speak up. Also, I'd just like to say that I think no means no can be problematic. There are limitations when no means no, and even yes means yes. You see, insisting or seeking that one or the other, insisting or seeking a yes or a no puts the onus on one person to be the gatekeeper of the consent for the shared encounter. We should instead instill the idea that the person suggesting or wanting to do something should take equal responsibility for the yes, not the recipient having to take full responsibility for it, so that they both decide on a mutually negotiated, shared and pleasurable experience and get to know each other's needs, wants, likes and desires. They're just some of the concepts I cover in consent. So next slide, please. We also talk about our safety network and who we're going to tell if someone doesn't respect our consent or our permission or our body bubble. Next slide. So we use this, and click again. This is the activity sheet. Just click again, see if that comes up. Yep, activity sheet to draw our body bubble and colouring the bathers because our private body parts are under the bathers, and our mouth is also a private body part as well, so we colour in that. And just click one and I'll show you some examples, and you can click through to these 3, it's 2 more clicks. One person did some sharp edges. If anyone comes near me, they'll get poked. And another one said in a matter-of-fact sort of way, oh, I've just added a penis because I'm a boy, so just click one more time. And then another one hysterically laughing said, if they come into my body bubble, they'll smell my fart. But these are the things I see. Next click. A 5-year-old said to me as they were colouring in their sheet one day, I'm so glad you taught me about that hugging thing. I've just been hugging anyone whenever I want to. And the 5-year-old friend said, yeah, that's right, she does. Okay, so moving on to the last one, I'm just going to show you this beautiful video that this is just the chorus. I'm putting this on and you'll never get it out of your head for the rest of the day. It goes for the 30 seconds. I have got their permission to use it in the classroom from the Tiny Tim and Stevie's. You can play that. Thanks for listening, everybody.
name's Nora Watson. I'd really like to thank the organisers for giving me the opportunity to share my experience in presenting RSC today. My work in facilitation began in 2015 as part of the local community education team. Our team of 4 were trained in protective behaviours and the New South Wales NatCan Love Bites program. During 2015, 16 and 17, our team presented to over 3,000 students in the West area, and I loved every minute of it. Our team was built and led by Christine Camp, who had worked hard to build relationships with local primary and secondary schools, both public and private. We created a sought-after team in our area, and I'd like to share with you why it worked so well. Firstly, as I mentioned, it was the relationships, the conversations we had with the schools. Identifying the issues was incredibly important. For high schools during this time, sexting was on top of the list. We made great use of the Respect Me Don't Sex Me program, a wonderful resource from Melbourne's South Eastern Centre Against Sexual Assault, and I still use this resource today. Secondly, our team. Christine knew our strengths, and together we made use of them. While one was leading the topic, the other was adding value and support. This was important during group sessions, especially in times of disclosure, because we use protective interruption. Thirdly, was our style of presentation. The key was our ability to work with smaller groups. This gave students the opportunity to talk and listen to each other, and hearing their peers talking about these topics was often more powerful. We used station rounds for presenting content, our magic sticky wall, which teachers loved almost as much as the students, and music. We always had music playing. Spotify playlists were and still are a must when I'm facilitating. We were witness to hundreds of conversations, everything from young girls believing they were still virgins because they'd only engaged in anal sex, groups of girls finding out that and supporting friends that was being pressured into sending nudes, and the popular surfer boy who reached out and asked for things to say to girls because he wasn't ready to have relationships yet. And the posters. There were so many created to share the messages, every single one of them different. These were displayed at schools, on social media, and the Clontarf Academy had these made into t-shirts. Lastly, we had to be flexible, because if you're having a conversation with students about consent, pornography, domestic or family violence, and they were leading that conversation, which they often did given the opportunity, the last thing you wanted to do was shut it down. Sometimes we had to, but if we could, we just went with it. The feedback we received from teachers and students during this period was overwhelmingly positive, and 2 in particular have stayed with me. The first was the day our high school deputy principal visited our workshop. We had 35 students split up into 4 groups around the space. Conversations happening in every single one, and he said, "This is what every classroom should look like." Then there was the year 10 student who had to leave at recess on the second day of the Love Bites program. He was heading to Perth for the weekend. So we gave him the certificate, waved him goodbye, and continued with our day. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door, and this young man walked back in. He looked at us and said, "You know what, I can go to Perth any weekend, but I won't get another chance to do this." So it confirmed to us that we were on the right track, presenting engaging and relevant content. The start of 2018, however, saw a change in direction for our team, with reduced opportunities to work within schools as they endeavoured to build their own capacity to deliver these programs. I believe this to be the greatest challenge for schools. Not only must they recognise the worth of RSE, they must also find the teachers that can and must be trained and comfortable in delivering the content. Handing a lesson plan about sexual abuse or domestic violence to a teacher simply because they are under load, I believe, is fraught with danger leads to poor outcomes and missed opportunities for students. And as usual, we see Victoria leading the way on this with a dedicated respectful relationship unit within the department, offering support for implementation and resources to lead and partner schools, funding for up to 2 years, with personal learning for staff. For Victoria, it's about a cultural shift. And given the stats around relationship violence, I believe this is what we need to aspire to. I started my current role as Student Wellbeing Officer at Geraldton Grammar School in 2018. I believe it to be unique in that I'm a school counsellor offering one-on-one support, but also a facilitator in both protective behaviours and respectful relationships, in part to students Year 3 through to Year 12. My principal asked me to create and present programs in line with the Keeping Safe Child Protection curriculum to both Year 11 and 12 cohorts. And this is where the mashup of RSC really began for me, because as well as creating those programs, I was also assisting with the Year 7 to 10s to ensure more respectful relationship content. My base of knowledge and resources in protective behaviours and the Love Rights program, further training in the Keeping Safe Child Protection curriculum, sexual health nuts and bolts, and online resources enable me to create different activities for each year group over a range of different topics. When creating activities, I borrow and adapt from training days that I've attended, and my thinking is, if I'm having fun creating an activity, then the students will probably have fun doing it. Or maybe it's just my tendency to make things big. My giant snakes and ladders game came from reading through a resource that simply said print out snakes and ladders sheets, and I thought, well, that's pretty boring. I could make a big one and have the students beat the pieces on the board, and that's what happens. So students work in pairs, one throwing, of course, a big fluffy dice, and the other moving across the board. I use this for consent with Year 12s and domestic and family violence with Year 9s. This activity and others are not played to make light of these subjects. I stress this with every single group. It's about being able to make students feel comfortable as possible when talking about these really important subjects. In both my facilitation roles, I've found that getting students up and about with this content can be really helpful. I'm now in my 7th year of presenting both protective behaviours and respectful relationships, and I'm learning and adapting every single day. Christine Camp, my mentor and friend, a passionate advocate for empowering young children and young people about their own safety, often said to me, "Lara, my goal is to light the fire in others." Christine knows that she lit the fire in me, and now I try to do the same thing, sharing my passion with not only the teachers who I now work alongside, but the students, to let them know that they all have choices and that they all have the right to feel safe.
Do we have any questions from the room?
If you've got a bit of time, can you explain how the snakes and ladders works?
Oh, right, okay. Yes, so they're in pairs and they roll the dice. If they get onto a ladder, they have to, I sort of made that as I go, but they have to give me a consent scenario, and it's not just, oh, this happened. I need the environment, I need who's involved, and I need the outcome. So I don't need what happens, but I want the whole thing. I just don't want it. I asked for it, and she gave it, or they gave it. So, and then often I do. I say to the other groups, right, you get together, because if you can come up with a better one, then you will move ahead on the ladder. So that's what I do. And then when they get on the snake's head, I ask them things like 5 emotions that someone might feel if they weren't asked for consent, and then I ask them if it was if they had any, of course, what would it be called, and they'd say sexual assault. So we talk about those sorts of things. So it really is, you just come up with questions that will get them to give you the answers that are relevant to that topic. Yeah. It's great fun.
There might be some next notice game on a GDHR lesson, which I might be adapting really soon. What a great idea. Another kinesthetic lesson. Next, before we move on to the next presenter, just to remind presenters, I'm sure you figured it out and you're wonderful because you're all keeping to time. The bell will go at 6 minutes, warning you that there's another 2 minutes, and again at 8 when we're finished, and then there's a couple of minutes for questions. Next, we have Raf Pondi from Court School presenting innovative ways to integrate sexual health curriculum into the secondary school experience. Nice to see you. Good morning.
Morning everyone, my name is Raf and I'm one of the co-heads of senior school at Port Care School. So just wanted, is anyone here from the care school sector? Brilliant. Okay, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's curriculum and re-engagement in schools. So we tend to be the schools that pick up the kids that run away from the rest of your school and run away as far as I can see most of the time. So a lot of our kids, the demographic of our school is quite diverse. I've been there 7 years, and in that time I've seen an amazing journey, and especially really centrally around the RSC sort of scope and breadth of that curriculum. Just to give you a little bit about our demographics, because I think that sets things into context a bit. We've got about 140 enrolled students, currently 50-50 boys and girls, with quite a healthy smattering of trans students in there too. And just to say that a lot of trans youth are finding our school to be a very safe place to go to from their mainstream schools. We're building up a bit of reputation for ourselves with that, which I'm very proud of. We have currently 25% of our intake is Indigenous students. We have a middle school, a senior school, a young parent centre, so for predominantly, at the moment it's exclusively young mums, though we're not close to the idea of young dads, who have children coming back to engage with their education, and an early learning centre on the campus too. We also have a mobile classroom program, which is to engage primarily Indigenous students who are disengaged and have anxiety or trauma-related issues and don't want to come to school. And that's a really creative program, and quite far outreach service that goes into, not into people's homes, because we're not allowed to do that anymore, but we'll take the students elsewhere to do curriculum with them. We do offer CGA and VET offerings. We do have non-chronological learning groups, so that means that we have students typically from years 9 to 13 in that one group. There's a lot of different reasons for that selection. It works for us to a point, but it does pose some restrictions, which I'll run to address in a second. We also have recently employed the direct instruction pedagogical method as a way to re-engage students that are regularly turning up for school. And that's really actually working out very well for us at the minute. And health is a core subject within the curriculum. So if I can put it on a scope, English and maths enjoy the same timetable time as health. And I think that's pretty important to say. Our core values are community, diversity, empowerment and growth. And I'll speak to that in a bit, because those values I think are keys for any school or any health worker, any health ed worker, to actually push the agenda as far as they want to. Because you can link anything in with your school core values or the mission statement of your school, the strategic direction and vision of your school, and I'm sure that you get an applause for actually thinking of it and you'll be allowed to innovate. So I've mentioned the non-chronological classes. They can be obviously quite difficult when you're dealing with these sorts of issues, because you're dealing with kids at different stages of the developmental journey, if you like, or evolution. We have devised mechanisms to sometimes have gender group discussions or classes, to sometimes have extracurricular activities like camps or excursions that will cater to those divisions, and they've worked well enough for us for the time being. That age difference though is also quite good, because it actually enables peers to lead in a sort of like a leadership role. The direct instruction models, anybody here, anyone else in school embracing the direct instruction model? Just to say a quick word, you'll probably hear a bit more about this, it's becoming quite fashionable again. We have what I told to go extensive training. The training is bloody extensive, really rigorous and really hard. It's basically using the teacher as the principal resource in the classroom. So student-driven learning takes a sort of a bench a bit, and there's a lot of onus on reviewing the content or reviewing the skills that you have learned. So a lot of the time repeating what has been delivered, if you like, and that can be a bit of a problem sometimes because of the time paucity of it. And I'm the only subject specialist teacher, although by trade I'm actually a philosophy teacher, and I actually came from the private school sector. So I taught at Wesleyan at Hale, taught philosophy, which makes me master of no trades, jack of none, which is very, very good with a health curriculum, I find. My slideshow is really about innovation and how innovation doesn't mean necessarily having to be like really creative in a sense of being artistic or doing really fun things all the time. It's just actually about using innovative thought models to apply to your whole school structure to make outcomes happen. We have the next slide, please. So one of the things that I would really recommend for that's worked in our journey is innovation by collaboration with external agencies. There are times when I've really felt like I haven't been an expert on a subject, and I haven't had time to, on top of my other responsibilities, to develop that insight in as much depth as I wanted to. And I thought it would be doing a disservice to the students who need to go in half-baked with only half the knowledge or half the skills. So I have relied very extensively and very heavily on the outside external agencies that exist with that specialist knowledge. And I have built such amazing friendships and collaborative networks within that. And they've been very powerful in the delivery of what we do at our school. Now, what I want to say about this is innovation by collaboration with external agencies does not mean that you hand them a block of time and you just sit back and enjoy while someone else takes your lesson for 6 weeks. If only that was the case, that would be lovely. But you sit and scope the project from start to finish with that organisation. You work out who's having which role, and then you roll with it, and you try and be ambitious and trial and error. So one of the things that we've done is we've actually run several expeditions, I was going to say, sort of excursions to sexual headquarters as a means of not only letting them know where the services are, if they need urgent assistance or any kind of resources, but also as a way to kind of like get them feeling less stigma around going to a place that might be involved with, STIs and so forth. So we took a whole cohort of about 60 students, divided them up into 2 campuses. Everybody had an STI test. We had to get consent, obviously, from parents. In talking to that, the interesting discussion earlier on about that whole, what you do without parents' permission, we actually have the GDHR principle, which is informed minors. So if you have a student who is 18 or of the age 18 and below, and they are actually informed, so they're capable of understanding, they demonstrate the intelligence principles that you would expect, it is perfectly legal for you to override parental consent, especially when it comes to sexual ownership of sexual decision-making, sexual relations decision-making. We had a great time. We actually ended up having this fantastic day of activities, not enough time to tell you about those now. Finished up with a barbecue that was all-inclusive. We paid attention to the cultural diversity and the cultural needs of the students, so there was men only, secret women's business and men's only business. We had different types of things, but they all came together as a community to celebrate at the end. Brilliant. We've done collaborations with WA's Council and the Women's Council, just about respectful relationships, over six sessions exploring through art therapy and art exploration, which led to a poster being produced for a big, wasn't really a poster, actually if you go to the final slide, I'll just show you the poster. We produced a big, actually that's the long one as well. So this poster, which is now hanging outside, or inside I should say, the CPFS building in Freo, and our kids were actually invited to go and present that at the opening of the new CPFS building, and it was a real, very powerful moment of advocacy and self-advocacy and efficacy. We're very proud to do that. And since then, we've embraced an arts project that's around child protection every single year, so that's become part of our curriculum. And in relation to that, I think being innovative also thinks about having to program. So your co-curricular reinforcement of key issues. So don't just leave it to the health classroom. Be active in recruiting your co-workers. Sorry, there'll be no questions today. I didn't really practice this. So we will sit down and think about what texts are we using for our CGA? Are we doing inclusive literacy? So we're doing, at the moment, with the English text is The Mish by Gary Lunsborough, which is a story of an Indigenous LGBTIQ person, I won't do any spoilers there, but their journey, kids loving it. And we have, as much as we give rights to the kids who are in the LGBTIQ community, we also give the rights to everybody who is different and has a different opinion to express that in a safe way, because we find that by banning or censoring conversations, it just kind of fuels the, alt-right, which is really the alt-right movement. So we find safe places for them to be able to have those conversations, and we actually, actually go to the next slide. I'm going to wrap up now. So I've missed out pretty much the whole speech, but there's so much that we're doing. That's fine. If anyone wants to ask me questions at lunchtime, please feel free to do so. I might get them to put it up. Obviously, the time this. But one of the things we're looking to do in the future is to synthesise our curricula so that we're actually doing health sex ed through a diversity of lenses in the curriculum itself. So through history, looking at historical periods, aspects of history that interest the kids, and telling us kind of that narrative of how it's travelled. We're trying a bipartite student rainbow community in primary school, so kids can actually be more active themselves, at representing themselves, and being a bit more proactive about seeking those kinds of forums to explore and talk about their experiences. And also community service projects. I am very excited about this, and I'll have to mention very quickly. Don't ring the bell yet, like, just delay for it. I'm getting performance anxiety. So the thing I'm really excited about is we've just started to build a curriculum that looks at community service engagement as a way to reinforcing respectful relationships and sex education. And our partner agency in this is going to be Destiny Australia, which is an organisation that works very hard to liberate people from the child sex trafficking industry. And we're hoping to set up a project that actually gives curriculum time to not only raising awareness of these issues, but trying to spread some kind of peer leadership where the kids are actually going to be able to in some way engage with some of these young people that have been through quite bad experiences. We run a program that takes some of our youth to Malaysia every year, so there's scope to actually go on through and kind of meet with people in facilities where they are taken to then get on with their education after they've been rescued and so forth. So that's exciting. And last but not least, Fringe Fest. No, don't worry about that. Thank you. I've said thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry, that's so long.
Thank you so much, Gav. I really like on your final slide there how you have invited people to come and talk to you if they want to know more. And I think that's what today is about. It's about networking. I know we have so many amazing teachers and nurses and services in this room that are all huge allies and advocates for this space. We're kind of preaching to the converted, and I know that sometimes you feel a little bit isolated in your school and I'm not really champion trying to make this happen. So please use today as ways to connect with these people who are other people doing fabulous things, and Jackie can help connect you, and I can help connect you to the people in the room to join forces, because I think that's what we need to do. Next up, we've got Madison Norton from Korean Senior High School with DIY genitals, which I'm dying to know what that is.
Good morning, everyone. I've never actually thought in my professional career I would have the words genitals or DIY genitals plastered above my head, but here we are. So my name is Madison Norton, and I'm from Korean Senior High School, and at that school I am the health education coordinator as well as a health and phys ed teacher. Today I want to share with you some fun and really inclusive things that you can implement into your classrooms and into your health programs. So, there's a lot of things. Before we begin, let's just get a gauge on things. So people with their gorgeous red hair, we see you, and even though it's a small percentage, it is still really common. So an interesting statistic is that it's quite similar for intersex people. Now, there are at least 40 known intersex variations, which generally describe someone whose sex characteristics don't fit the medical or the social norms typical of male and female bodies. In a school setting, this really puts things into perspective. So even though 17 in 1,000 is only an approximate, but our health programs do reach every single kid in that school. So by creating this awareness and using this inclusive language, even if it positively impacts just one student, then I feel like we're being successful at our jobs. So as a heterosexual, cisgender, really cookie-cutter female, I struggle with this, I really do. And as teachers, like, how can we be on top of it all? Terminology is constantly updating, but it's just about giving it a go, because we can always come back and correct ourselves. So my tip is to always use language with the right intentions, but also to be checking in with people that are regularly updating, like the people at the RSE project and GDHR, because they do have more knowledge than us in our teaching capacity often can do. Now, as we've seen before, when delivering RSE in our classrooms, it can be really awkward for the kids, and it can be the only experience that they actually do get to learn about this. But this is where we come in. However, how often have we, and this is, I'm glad this was touched on before, but how often have we projected these diagrams up on our lessons, and I sit there with our secret notes trying to remember what is the epididymis and where it is, and then we expect the kids to understand that as well and remember that, because it's a bit extreme. So that's one of our issues. And then another thing is, like every subject, is kids are coming to us with prior knowledge, especially in a high school setting, depending on what their primary school background is or their family background. And it's really challenging to meet those needs within a 1 hour time frame. And then, as mentioned before as well, is a lot of teachers get nervous or overwhelmed as to using and implementing gender diverse language and about getting it right or wrong. So now this is where we get to bring the fun back into things, and everyone in this room knows that this is what works. We need our lessons to be engaging, we need them to be relevant, and we need to be creating a safe learning environment. So this is a video that a little short clip I like to use to introduce the topic of the lesson, and it really gets the kids' minds buzzing, and it's by ASAP Science, YouTuber, called We Are All Females. So here's a little snippet, I hope it works for you. You want to hear this? We're going to hack.
The ovaries descend to become the testes, and the labia fuses to create the scrotum. If you're a male, take a look. Though it's more pronounced in some men than others, you'll likely notice a line or ridge of tissue on the scrotum, which is called the scrotal ring. The skin of the scrotum and penis are zipped up like a zipper as the layers of cells develop in the embryo, and the male variant of the clitoris again, that's the penis. If the Y chromosome does not become activated for some reason, then the female phenotype or physical appearance will persist in a male. While we're at it, this is also part of the reason males have nipples. The nipples form before the activation of the Y chromosome and SRY gene, and thus remain through development and life. But you don't develop breasts. Sorry.
Right, so kids love that, and even just the other day I was kind of practicing with my year 11 health studies kids, and I showed them this, and they're like, what do you mean the clitoris is like the penis? And just really great discussion there. Oh, there we go. Alright, so this brings us back to the ridiculous name of DIY genitals. So the activity I want to share with you, it links to puberty, it links to reproductive systems, sexual health, and the likes. And before, as well, when we go into any of these topics, like it's been touched on a million times, that consent is key, so thanks to everyone that's already covered that stuff for me. There we go. So for this activity, we made up fun bags. For one group, it was about 3 to 4 students each. It was a brown paper bag filled with all of these wonderful items. I would love a Kmart sponsorship. Fantastic. Plus glue and sticky tape and any other random items available to you. So it is really doable. We had 430 Year 7 students complete this activity at once, so across 14 classes. So it's a big task, but it was really effective. Yes, our school is huge. So here's a couple of pictures. So our kids, they really loved it. As you can see, they did have their label diagram that we did do in class, but then essentially we just let their creative juices really flow and get into this. So even my behaviour students, or those with learning difficulty needs who really struggle to get involved, they completed the work and they had just a really fantastic time with this. Now, these two, they're fantastic for different reasons. They both led to really great discussions about correct terminology and functions. The one on the right was actually really fantastic. It was surprisingly clever. They attached the straw to the party blower to demonstrate encryption, and you can imagine the extent of learning that actually happened in these lessons, because we were constantly able to walk around and provide specific feedback that was instant to individuals or small groups, depending on where their level of understanding was, and it was a really great opportunity to know where each of our students kind of were at. And as well, it all happened in a really safe environment, because they were working in their small groups, and it wasn't me standing there saying, this is the penis, this is the clitoris, and that kind of thing. Now, generally speaking, this task appears to be very exclusive of stereotypical male and female bodies. But if you look at these, there's not a single one that actually is normal, right? This then led to those really, really amazing conversations about different sizes, different shapes, gender diversity, intersex variations. And that's where, most health lessons, they are about conversations, and it's really, really fantastic for the kids to engage in this and be creating those learning opportunities themselves. So that's where it wasn't just, heterosexual or male-female stereotypes, even though that's what they initially did. Just really quickly, some adaptations when implementing into your own programs or your own classrooms, if you can make it more sustainability or economically, environmentally, that's the word, friendly. So maybe using recycled items or if you're outside in nature, etc. But additionally, you might want to intentionally set the task of your students to create an intersex variation, but that would require a lot more prior explicit teaching as opposed to the discovery learning that we implemented with ours. And then finally, some tips is all RSE lessons and conversations is just because we don't know of any intersex students or any gender diverse students in our classes doesn't mean that they aren't there. So it's really to do your best to use that inclusive language. Try swapping out words of normal with words like typical, or instead of all, use words like most or many or some. And then overall as well, let's just really keep the learning fun. And I just wanted to share this little moment with you. So at the end of the lesson, through old habits and just mindfulness and exhaustion, I said, all right, today all the girls, you can go first. And immediately a little, one of my sweet, sweet little boys with autism puts up his hand and goes, but you're Mrs. Norton. Technically, are we all female? So, so if you have any questions on over time as well, I'd love to speak to you on the break too. Thank you.
Do we have any quick questions? I was just looking at this. Wow. I'm reminded of this activity, doing this very activity in the primary school many years ago, and did a life-size body version and hung them up all over my classroom, and the principal walked in and said, "You have to leave those up, are you?" "Yes, I am." Right next to all the other parts of the body. Also, those lessons are actually on GDHR, and there are some tips around how to be inclusive in terms of body diversity and intersex variations, so have a look at those. They are ones that have been recently updated. Next, we have Craig Stein from Maidavale Primary School, who is going to be doing the RSE Olympic cycle.
Good morning, Jess. Good morning, everyone. So talking about the RSE Olympic cycle today, that title probably needs a little bit of explanation. I'm a stereotypical phys ed teacher that we heard about from the panel a bit earlier. So I'll give a slightly different perspective on what they heard, but I totally agree with what they said, because I was parachuted in as a high school phys ed teacher about 10 years ago and requested to teach puberty in year 8. Know nothing about it other than probably about a week of it at uni. So early warning signs were kicking in then, as they have over the last little bit. Olympics obviously topical because, well, it's Olympic year. But for us at Maidavale, it's actually been a 4-year process in getting to this stage. So I'm going to take you through our journey over the last 4 years. And cycle, well, anyone that teaches RSE knows about the alphabet game, and there's a word for you that you use in the A to Z alphabet game, cycle. So moving on. So our school is in the metro area. It's out in the east of Perth in the hills, just to give you, I suppose, a snapshot on what we're dealing with. Obviously, every context is a little bit different, but for us, very well, lack of diversity, I suppose, is the word we use to describe our school. You can see from the photos there, that tends to be depicts what the school looks like. That's our student population. We're a lovely little community. It's just at the foothills out to the east of Perth. But word that's been used to describe is sheltered, naive. Just 4 or 5 years ago, our students didn't have a great handle on some of the topics that are covered in RSC. We're told by parents that when they got to high school, they just really weren't well equipped for it. So it sort of led to us going down the path of what can we do for our students. Our school board came to us and we put in a plan in place. And I just want to acknowledge there at the bottom as well, we have been partnered with the RSC project since 2018. I want to give full disclosure with that. We have been very fortunate to be partnered with Jackie and her team, and I wanted to give a shout out to Jackie because she's been a great sounding board over the last 4 years with it. When those early warning signs were kicking in and we weren't sure about doing something, we always knew that we could turn to Jackie and her team, so we really appreciate the support. Thank you. So our journey 4 years ago started with a Year 6 parent-student sex ed workshop. Our associate principal at the time, Carolyn Pinkard, she had some experience of that with her own children, and she thought that would be a good place for us to start the journey. So our very first presenter is Christine herself. So there's a few photos that I'll take through the story, but I'll start top left of each screen and go clockwise around. So Christina ran our very first Year 6 parent workshop back in 2017. We had great success from that. Had about 50% of the cohort attend, which was an evening session and a weekend session. At the time, we didn't think that was fantastic, but we were reassured that it was a success, and just to get that many people in the room to talk about sex and relationships was a fantastic thing. We worked alongside a number of agencies to give our parents the resources so they could take away after the workshop as well. There's some photos bottom right of parents and students initiating a conversation. That's what those workshops are about, just starting that conversation and hopefully giving them the confidence, the parents that is, to take it further on. And it led to presenting at the 2017 Symposium, so I'm in that photo bottom left, and that was all about our successes at that workshop. And Christina we were fortunate to have her for 2 years, and Christina, you'd be pleased to know we're still continuing that workshop to this day, so thank you for your efforts, and we really appreciate it. So that was sort of setting the scene from where we're at that stage, though. I sort of felt like that person on the island that Sherelle spoke about before. Wasn't sure if I was up to it, if I could take it on. It certainly wasn't all about me, but certainly reiterate the point that it needs some other champions within the school, otherwise it certainly would fall flat. So the next year I was fortunate that, well, not so fortunate, the principal actually tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Great, I think we need to push this as a whole school thing. Let's look at getting some other people involved in this." So I've been very fortunate since that time to have a team of champions within the school who've been advocating for RSC and promoting the message throughout the school. So we've been upskilling our staff at different touch points throughout the 4-year journey, all towards that statement at the top, which I'm sure you've heard, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. We were passive bystanders, and we really needed to get and take some action and make some change. So having those people on board is fantastic. I'm proud to say I have a couple of staff here today supporting me with that, who have been advocates for it over the last few years. We have Nicola Burnley up the back, I mentioned them. Nicola's done a Master of Sexology here at Curtin, so it's great that she can put what she's learned back into our school as well. And Lara Goes, who's our Associate Principal. So I have support from an executive and a board level as well. And for me, sitting back and getting that support is really empowering, and we're able to make some significant change. So if you are that person in the room today that's sitting here and going, I'm not really sure, I am by myself, then I echo Sherelle's sentiments that I really want to try and find someone else for a group of people in the school. So since that time, we've then liaised with a number of different stakeholders, different key groups out there. So the RSC project, we were involved in the Respectful Relationships Teacher Support Program that the Department of Education ran. I know a number of schools have gone through that. Protected Behaviours, we offer a number of professional learning opportunities for our staff. We celebrate and support and acknowledge days, important days in the RSC calendar. So Wear a Purple Day is now something that we advocate for and support. White Ribbon Day, likewise, and just this year we've started on the US Strong program, which I know Danny Kerford is presenting this afternoon online, and that's something if you can get along to that, or you can tap into that, something we really encourage. It's had some big benefits for our school. So the next year saw us rise to that challenge. So really looked at embedding it across the school, started with our staff, started to engage a bit more with parents, and we started to have some success with our journey. So top left, we were part of that Respect for Relationships program, so we had some sessions with Dale Palmer from White Ribbon. Jackie came along to those as well, and that was great, just to reassure us that what we were doing was the right thing to be doing. You always do date yourself in this space, or we found that we doubted ourselves anyway, but it was nice to have that reassurance, and then it led to us going down that path and acknowledging those different events, different days and different programs. So US Strong, White Ribbon, we presented to some other schools about our successes with the Respect for Relationship program, 16 days in WA, and bottom left is one of my all-time favourite photos. It's me looking a little bit different, but with my youngest son, and this happened out of chance. We had a crazy hair day at school, and by me putting on that wig, we entered into all sorts of different questions and conversations with students that I didn't expect, didn't anticipate. Mrs. Steen, why are you dressed that way today, Mrs. Steen? Just thinking that wasn't typical. I didn't always look like that, so it led to lots of interesting conversations. But realising that the 1 hour a week in health isn't the time, or isn't the only time that we can be talking about all these wonderful RSC topics. They come up by happenstance at different times, so that was a good acknowledgement of that. And then finally, the most important thing for us was celebrating that success in our 4th year. So over the last couple of years, we've done some fantastic things, or our students have done some fantastic things that have really taken on board the messages. So we've had US Strong Assemblies, we've had a DIY general session with our Year 6 students. Probably didn't have a good position there with photos, I must add, but I can look back at that picture and learn from that. I'll take something away from that. We had a US Strong session with our pre-primary students, so they bring their stuffies and they role model a lot of the expected relationship behaviour that we want to see. Rather than do it with another person, they're actually doing it with their stuffed animals, which I think is a nice way of introducing it. Done a lot of work with White Ribbon. The photo down the bottom with the mining staff, one of our parents engaged with us after a parent presentation and said, look, we're doing this at FMG. So there was a connection made there, which was fantastic. And then lastly is our workshop that we still run with our Year 6 parents to this day. So we've got things that we're going to, we want to still go with this. We're not sitting on our hands by any means, but it is a 40-year journey, or it's a longer journey. People in this room have advocated it far longer than we have, but we want to continue that journey, and we're thankful for all the people in the room that have supported us over the years as well. So thank you.
Any questions? You can grab in that much time and ask all the questions. Thanks, Craig. That certainly was an Olympic effort, and I think it really goes to show that it's not about being perfect, it's not about being able to fix it all at once, it's about making those small improvements bit by bit, and it takes time. And then by the time you've got to that stage, something's changed and you need to improve again. That's just the way learning goes, as we all know. Up last, but certainly not least, I'm really excited to invite the St Hilda's Anglican Schoolgirls down to present on a fantastic project called You Can't Unsend, a web series proposal by teenagers for teenagers. And I was very excited that St Hilda's girls presented their pitch to me via VC, because it was during COVID. And I had just had a challenging few months / year working with a marketing company. And I came off of the VC, and I think I said to the girls at the end of it, can we work with you on our next campaign, please? Because you're incredibly professional. So I'm really excited to see their presentation up next. Thanks, Kelly.
So, hey everyone, we're the media committee from St Hilda's. I'm regarded as Margot, Rachel and Lauren, and in conjunction with the Department of Health, we've been working on a web series resource that we think could be used in classrooms.
So the background of our project. So Miss Sinclair from our school's physical education department came to us with information about the Department of Health offering small grants to schools to support their RSE programs. And our media committee was formed early last year when we got the information, and we decided that that would be our main project for the year. And instead of spending the money buying someone else's resource, we thought, why not make our own? And with this small grant, we bought 2 books on consent so that we could be knowledgeable in the topics we wanted to cover. And we also bought some SD cards for when we're ready to go. So after taking on the task, we started our research, and this included researching consent, sexual assault and harassment, audiovisual texts, campaigns, and trending topics and hashtags. And from this, we found there was not a lot of choice for teenagers aged 13 to 17, and for male, female, and non-binary genders. And we started this project in 2020, and it's now 2021. So there's obviously been a lot of progression in these areas, and there's been a lot more conversations and media coverage. And at school, we've had guest speakers coming to us to talk about these topics, and there's just been a lot more awareness around sexting. And with our project, we aim to include diversity as a secondary focus, but for our first idea, it's just going to be the stereotypical boy-girl relationships.
For the purpose of this initial pitch, we are looking to target teenagers, specifically those under 9. We've chosen this age group as the ages of 14 and 15 are below the age of consent. These tend to also be very impactful years in the lives of teenagers, as they're still learning to differentiate right from wrong, as well as beginning to understand their personal rights and develop a sense of self. Our objective is to educate teenagers on the dangers and consequences of sexting in a straightforward and a direct way. We aim to communicate both the short-term and the long-term consequences of sexting through our production, which will be in the form of an interactive web series. Our web series will be highly adaptable and can be used as both a teaching text in class as well as used at home. In the production of this series, we really want to avoid being patronizing. Although the series will portray consequences of sexting simply, we don't want the viewer to feel as if it has been dumbed down or simplified for them. We also want the series to avoid feeling fake. We plan to combat this through the use of genuine and authentic language and accurate, believable depictions of characters and context. We also want to avoid diluting the issue. Through the series, there will be a strong focus on our original aim, and the topic will be addressed very seriously and with maturity. Although we plan to address unfortunate scenarios and events, we really do not want to create fear in our audience. We want them to instead learn from the mistakes made by the characters in the series so that they are able to behave differently if they find themselves in a similar scenario. Finally, we really want to avoid whitewashing and underrepresentation. We want students to feel seen in our production, especially those who are often denied this representation in mainstream media. We also feel that this inclusivity will allow all of our audience to relate more strongly to our production and therefore resonate more with what is depicted.
So our web series will follow the structure of multiple interactive choose your own adventure style episodes. The break between choices will allow the teacher a chance to stop and debrief the class and answer any questions any students may have. This will allow for discussion between students, which will encourage them to exercise their critical thinking and any choices that they would make if a situation like this was presented to them. And we hope this will lead to a more engaging learning experience rather than just having information dumped into their heads. So through the act of choosing a specific narrative pathway, students will feel more connected to their character and hopefully will empower the student to get engaged in more positive choices both within the episodes and in their own lives.
So we're looking to produce 4 episodes with a self-contained narrative, and each episode will be about 5 to 8 minutes long. Students will be offered choices at points in the episode, and the narrative of each episode will be determined by the choices made in the previous episode by the students. Each episode will centre on a different character's perspective, a boy, a girl, a parent, and a teacher.
because that can offer insight into different issues faced by these characters and their associated paths of action.
So now we'd like to present our initial storyboard of this short film that will act as a sort of introduction to the 4 interactive episodes. Each episode, as we've said, will follow the different perspectives, and the theme of the short film is the fact that you can't understand.
So scene 1 will open in both the boy and girl's bedroom. It'll change between them to offer the different reactions of each character. And we see them texting, that will be a screen recording, and then breaking up. Now, the lighting that we're choosing to use on the last slide is quite significant because we wanted to foreshadow that this is going to be a messy breakup with some severe consequences that will be explored during the project.
So something that we've decided to do is to film it on phone screens and screen record it to make it clear and know exactly what has happened in these text messages. As you can see above, it says the girl and the boy, and it like changes from their texting screen so that the students watching will like clearly know what is happening. And the text itself, it's quite rude, a poor handling of the situation, which does reflect how a lot of teenagers might have quite messy breakups, and the heightened emotions will lead them to making maybe some less than adequate decisions that they might regret in the future. So yeah, it will reflect similar feelings and situations that students in our age group may be experiencing.
So again, as we said, the language is going to be quite confronting. Anyways, so the dark lighting, that will communicate the boy's obviously fragile state, it's just been dumped over text, and how this can lead to poor choices as the Ghana heightened. And so we see the boy looking at photos of his relationship with this girl, and he's just going to delete them all because he just doesn't see the point of keeping them.
So we see that the negative choice that he has ended up making. The lighting it shows quite gloomy to see the headspace the boy is in, and of course the photos of their relationship. The photo that he has landed on is quite compromising picture of their ex. The theme, which relates back to the theme of that you can't understand. So he's now forever put out this material into the world, which will lead to further unfavorable repercussions for both individuals. And we wanted to focus on how easy it is for someone to hurt someone that they used to care through like a simple tap of a button.
So then we can just transition into, so first of all, the boy sends the photo to his friend, and again, quite confronting language is rude. It's used to convey his emotions and how heightened the situation is based on emotion. So we transition into scene 2, and the girl doesn't know what's happened, and it's just repercussions of the boy's actions. And it also touches on gossiping culture, because as we can see, everyone's just not on her side, everyone's like targeting her, and it can just, it's very vulnerable for the girl, and it just induced by her peers just not helping.
So then we see the two friends rush off into a more private location in order to figure out a solution for their dilemma. So we wanted to show how in an overwhelming situation where a teenager doesn't exactly know what to do, they're more likely to undertake whatever choice that is thrown by the people around them who are probably also in a similarly uninformed position, which might lead to the situation blowing out of proportion. So the dialogue is important as well as it showcases the lack of language a student might have and the choices they are unaware that, and the choices that they have that they might be unaware of. And the purpose of our resource is to give students a better idea of what choices they have and give them some language to use in a situation like this confronting them.
Time for script. Just to conclude, it'll fade to black and the audience will be given a choice, obviously, whether to do this action or not. Sexting is a major issue and amongst teenagers and society. And basically, as we said, we just want to create a safe environment to explore these choices, just to take risks and explore these consequences without any actual repercussions in real life. And hopefully these skills that students learn can transition into real life. So if they're faced with these action choices themselves, it's like, oh, I've done this before, I'm not going to do that. So yeah. Thank you. And
why I was so impressed. Incredible. And I think that just proves why we do this, right? Have young people like that leading the way. And really exciting, this has come from a school grant proposal that St Hilda's went with, and I guess exceeded even my wildest hopes of what might come of these school grants in terms of being able to work with the school now to potentially have this resource made and used on GDHR. So, like they said, for teenagers, made by teenagers makes a lot more sense than